Sit back, relax, put your belt on, and enjoy the show.
Look at the to move backwards now, since we've already delved into it a little bit. The red card. So I've got the way that the law needs to be interpreted here on screen. You can obviously see the Koroibete red card being handed out 4 minutes and 27 seconds into a game. So gigantic decision for the context of this series and for the context of 1 million people trying to watch the game at home. So point one, has head contact occurred? If no, play on. Now, I think that this is something that we can debate, but we'll have a look at the footage. If yes, was there any foul play? If no, play on. If you're saying there was head contact, then I'd have to say that it's foul play. So we move on. The player at fault, I think largely Koroibete, if it was in the head, would be at fault. Was the degree of danger low, medium, or high? Well, without a doubt, he flew in at high pace. So it can't be low danger. So it has to be medium or high. I think that's fair.
Yep.
Probably high with the pace that he came in and how hard the hit was. And was there any mitigation? Now, mitigation will not apply for intentional or highly reckless acts of foul play. This wasn't intentional. This wasn't highly reckless. And there was definitely mitigation when the player dropped his height. Now, O'Keefe said, he said that there was no mitigation, but it should go from a red to a yellow card if you think he made contact with the head. And I should say that from some of the correct points on Twitter, that their head also counts as anything above shoulder. So that counts the throat as well, which was the argument of a lot of people. If we flick forward, then we have the World Rugby Law Application Guide. So this is how it should be applied, which is what we were just talking about. So the considerations for mitigation is, what's the player's line of sight? Is there a sudden and significant drop or movement? Is there a clear attempt to change the height? And is the level of control good or not? And finally, is it an upright tackle? Is it passive or dynamic? So he's not upright. He's bent at the hips. We're going to have a look at that. The level of control, I think he is in control. So I don't think I don't think we can defend him too much there as well in terms of making it's not like he was knocked into the tackle. There's a clear attempt to change height and that he lowers it. And I think we're going to have a look at the footage here and see about the change of height of Jelonch. So here we go. Let's slide through. Now, here's the play in real time, sorry. Huge hit. And let's come through.
That can't have been real time because he took about 3 minutes to react.
There's the face there. Yeah, there's the delay. So, I mean, I think we've already made our thoughts pretty well known about what we think of Jelonch, but this is the $1 million picture for me. This one's great because when we're looking behind Jelonch, you can't see anything, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think we can defend ourselves there. Let's go over to the close-up view looking at Korombete's right shoulder. Now, there was arguments for some people that it was a shoulder charge, and people keep saying he led with the shoulder. So for the record, every single tackle needs to lead with the shoulder for it to be an effective tackle. You don't tackle someone with your arms. So there's a real issue that people are trying to say that makes it a shoulder charge. He's clearly wrapping his right arm as he makes
the elbow. Watch the elbow of Jelonch actually deflect and block Koroibete's arm continuing to move forward.
So we can see here on this image that Korombete's right shoulder is behind the chin of Jelonch on the frame, and you can see the shadow of Jelonch's chin on Korombete's shoulder. So that means that there has to be space between his right shoulder and Jelonch's head. So therefore, the contact cannot be made direct to the head. Arguably, it's made on the chest or throat, and it's not clear in any way, shape, or form.
The image kind of shows, like slotting together a jigsaw puzzle, you actually couldn't have hit him more perfectly.
I agree. I completely agree. Now, Dave Rennie said that he was on the actual board that actually came out and said how these things should be interpreted. And he said one of the key pieces of information was what happens to the player's head after he's hit. If the player's head goes forward, it's because it didn't hit the head and it's hit the chest, and therefore the player's head gets left behind the tackle. If it goes backwards, it's because the contact was constant, was immediate and on the head. So you can see the first movement there is the head comes forward onto Koroibete's shoulder, which means the tackle is not made on the throat or head. And then after that, the entire body goes back. But can you see how the head is still whipping forwards?
For sure, yeah.
There's no possible way that tackle can be on the actual head. As we come out, you'll actually see where Koroibete's shoulder is in relation to Jelonch, because he might have slid down a little bit, but it's still well in the middle of his pec. So there's no way you can definitely say that was ever on the head or neck. And actually, the biomechanics say that there's no way it can be. As we come forward, we get to see how much he dominated Geelong and then how much of a coward Geelong is and how much respect we can all lose for him from here. And hold on, there's the hit. Seconds have passed.
We've taken 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, 5 steps.
Now, last thing I want to say is the mitigation body height, right? So was there a loss in body height? Because we were told there was not. Now, this isn't the absolute best view for it, but we'll use it on one clip. There's Geelong standing completely tall, 2 or 3 steps away from Koroibete. And then as he comes into contact, he is now crouched at the knee and crouched at the hip. Now, I could actually bring up the angles of his knee and hip to prove the point, but I think the footage that we've showed is already enough that he last minute dropped his height. So there is mitigation, even if it should be yellow. And secondly, you can see from the footage, it's clear he didn't actually hit directly on the head. Now, this is incredibly frustrating, and it's why I think it almost ruined the game. Thank God the Wallabies played one of their best games in a long period of time to save the match. But, you know, I've had a few people, as we put the kind of polls out to hear people's opinions over the last 24 hours, say the Wallabies won. Why do you care? I can tell you exactly why. I have the perfect answer. Because it's not just about this game. I am sick of these red cards ruining important test matches. It's ridiculous the impact that it has on the game, especially when things can be this unclear. It's something that seriously needs to be looked at. I can't understand why the Northern Hemisphere teams denied the 20-minute red card. At least they could have stomached some of it. It's just ridiculous. Minute of a game. They could have ruined the entire spectacle.
It's pretty simple and it's pretty clear when you break that down and you look at it. And we don't have all the angles. We don't have the ability to look at everything like a TMO does. But we also know that Koroibete is 13 centimetres shorter. He is bent at the hip and he is bent at the knees. There is no way that was on him for height when he clearly drops his height significantly in those last few steps as well. But I agree entirely. The issue out of this is that, yes, there's been a crackdown on head injuries and head injury assessments. The player was not going to come off for a head injury assessment until Hooper had to point it out and say he has to go off for a head injury assessment. He dropped to the ground holding his face. Another issue is he held the front of his face, which never touched. No matter what our interpretation is, the front of his face never touched Hooper. So for me, I think one thing that needs to be considered here is that clear acting and milking against the spirit of the game? Is that something where a penalty
100%.
Is that where a penalty could be overturned, other things could be thought about or brought in, or could that be reprimanded after the match and say this in itself is not against the spirit of the game? Could he get a fine? Could he get a match ban? Or I don't know what it can be, but we are looking at the moment at descending into, I think, something that is going to be very hard to change in rugby in the world. I'm fine with protecting the head. There's nothing wrong with protecting the head. But when there's a significant drop and there's those mitigating factors, they cannot be ignored.
Yeah.
Can I say? I
was just going to say, do you want to have the last point on this? And you can read out my favourite slide of our entire presentation today.
Yeah. No, my final thoughts on it, and I'll try not to drag it on, but it's just that for mine, mitigating factors is, I think, a confusing issue for a lot of people because lowering your body height, there's no one in that situation who isn't going to lower their body height for oncoming contact, right? That's like
it's a significant loss of lowering of height at the last couple of seconds.
Well, see, my interpretation of mitigating factors is, has the player kind of like slipped over or like fallen into a tackle? That is when, for mine, someone's coming in for a tackle, their head's almost down, and then they shoulder someone in the face because that guy has kind of slipped at the last second or whatever. That's when, in my opinion, you say there's mitigating circumstances. This person has committed to the tackle and the player that he tackled has fallen or slid out of the way, had a sudden drop, which was unavoidable. And that's when that's happened. That's how I interpret mitigating factors.
That's fair enough, Kagi. But the way that the player dropped still was, if it's a significant drop, it doesn't matter what caused him to drop. If he slipped over or he dropped his body height significantly, that shouldn't change what the tackler's body position was. He still significantly dropped.
Yeah, I guess for mine, in this scenario, this tackle, I actually don't think there were any mitigating factors, but I don't think that should have even been a question because I don't think the contact was anywhere in the red zone as we've discussed. But
the other issue is, look, it just wasn't clear enough. And when you really slow it down like we have here, which surely is what the TMO should be able to do but didn't, then it becomes more obvious. But if it's not that clear, how can you possibly send someone off for 76 minutes of a test match?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Look, my last point on this is the World Rugby often has, the flavour of the year that they're cracking down on. Only a year or two ago, we had if you touched any player anywhere in the air, it was a yellow or red card. We seem to have relaxed on that a little bit compared to a year or two ago. And this year, it is head contact. And of course, it is something that we want to see out of the game and whatnot. But I agree. It's ruining test matches. And particularly, the fact that it was mainly England and France that went against the 20-minute red card, replaced the player ruling, just makes no sense. But look, I think we've talked enough about this. Harry, you said I could read out the line.
Best part of the show.
Just had the news about, just before we started the pod, of Marika Koroibete. His red card was not upheld by the disciplinary committee. It was thrown out. They said there was absolutely nothing to it.
Now, come on.
Vindication!
Vindication!
That'll make more sense if you
the
watch
quotes
this.
that have been sent through from Ball Collar are the best. The player Marika Koroibete admitted to technically committing an act of foul play worthy of a red card. That is to say, he thought he must have hit him in the head and admitted fault. Then, having reviewed all the evidence, the committee deemed that Marika Koroibete's tackle on French loose forward Anthony Gelonche initially made shoulder-to-shoulder contact. In other words, they disagreed with the Aussie trying to dob himself in. Subsequently, through the impact, any contact to the chest and neck was incidental by Koroibete. Therefore, World Rugby's head contact process was not met due to mitigating factors, and the act of the foul play was secondary. There was no red card threshold. All the players that are saying it doesn't matter, we almost
Boys.
Amazing.
It's vindication finally. Look, I think we're going to descend if we don't move on.